Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Say Report, the show where I'm going to try not to talk like an old-timey prospector. I'm your host, Devon Decker, and joining me halfway across the country...
It's me, Sejohn Sarowick. Oh my God, you meant me.
Yes,
Sorry, I
I
got
did mean you. Who else is halfway across the country?
a lot of people. I don't know how to answer that question. Probably hundreds of thousands of people.
That's actually a pretty... Who else is halfway across the country that I regularly record a podcast with?
Well, there you go. Now it's down to about 10,000 people.
Yeah, right? Yeah, like 9,000, right? It's going down.
Right.
Anywho, welcome to the Say Report. We have a lot to get through this episode.
Oh, man.
But before we get to all of that, I would just like to say disclaimer, and it's one of those disclaimers you never really think you're going to have to give. But the Say Report is really not a show to be consumed or listened to while drywalling. Really, any sort of DIY.
Yeah, and no heavy machinery. Make sure you're not operating any heavy machinery while you're listening to the show.
And that comes from friend of the show, over from Board with Friends, Zach Dyer, was listening to us, our last week's episode, while he was drywalling his basement, and ended up putting a hole through the drywall. Now, I don't know if it's because he was laughing so hard that he just, like, punched through, or one of our opinions was just so polarizing that his anger, like, hulked him out, and he just had to punch through some drywall.
Yeah, my money's on the anger. My money's on him being just so upset at something that we were critiquing, and he just punched right through it. So
we were stuck in a car last week for 3 whole hours, Zach and I, and I actually would put my money on the latter because he's like, a lot of the time I disagree with you and I agree with Sejohn, and I like really disagree with you, Devon. Which is crazy because I feel like you and I hew sort of down the same path, but
I mean, yeah. We end up in the same destination, but sometimes we take some very different roads.
That is very, very true. So that's just a friendly reminder, a little disclaimer from your friends at the Say Report. Maybe don't do home improvement tasks while listening to us. We appreciate your ears on us, but just pay attention to the task at hand and then relax with the Say Report. We're like a fine brandy.
Yeah, and I was gonna make a home improvement joke, and it just didn't seem worth it. That's the place we're at, man. It's just not even worth it anymore with that.
That's a shame. That's a shame. I really liked Tim Allen, and then this past year happened.
Yeah, 2017 is really killing me so far.
So moving away from The Last Man Standing, there's another big thing today is from all of us at the Say Report to a very special person who I know is one of the reasons that I have the drive to still do creative things well into my later years in life. I can't speak for you, Sejohn, but...
No, I am there too. Let's not act like it's not important to me too.
No, I just want to I don't know if he had the same profound effect on you that he had on me.
You get through what this is first, and then I will tell you a very important story.
Oh, well, I want to tell you my story, too. This is good. It's like a nice compliment sandwich. A very happy birthday from all of us at the Say Report to David Howard.
Yeah.
He was one of those moments in my college career that really showed me I can accomplish anything. So thank you, David, and a very happy birthday.
Yeah, to the man that gave me the opportunity to dress up as Cogsworth for the night, and that was one of the greatest experiences in theater I've had yet in my life. I get to go around the Providence URI campus dressed as Cogsworth, introducing myself in character. It was amazing, and I got to do it all because of him.
I have to tell you, I really appreciate the context of that story.
Oh, that's not even the best.
To the guy who allowed me to dress up like Cogsworth as a knight, my mind could go in 2 different directions.
But no, that's the best story that I've got of David Howard was when I was a freshman in college, and at URI you have to take a Welcome to Real Life class. I forget what it's called.
URI 101.
Yeah, no, it's basically
URI 100. It's
yeah, something weird like that, right? Class 100, where like they basically teach you how to like live and breathe on your own, and they teach you how to do things like how to do your laundry, right? And David was responsible for teaching it for our department. So it was me and all the other theater majors in that class. And at the very end of it, he asked, the final exam for this wonderful class was him just literally sitting around going, give me one thing that you learned that you will take with you through the rest of your life. And we all had to go around the table. And I clearly have taken it with me because I'm about to repeat to you exactly what I said. I said, David, if there's one thing I've learned when I came to college, it's that I should remember always to pack a bundle of socks. And he looks at me and he goes, That's the proudest I've ever been of you. Because day one of that class was day one of school for us. He said, all right, let's talk about any initial problems anybody's having. And I just looked at him so sad, and I said, David, I didn't bring any socks with me to college. And he had this look on his face like he thought he had heard it all until he heard me say that. And so the fact that that was the lesson I learned from him was more than enough for David Howard.
All right, so I got two good David Howard stories. I have a million David Howard stories, but the two that always jump to mind, if like we're gonna sit around a circle, pass a beer around, and tell David Howard stories. First, the bad one, like the real worst one. In college, you have to get like your little part-time jobs, right, to help pay for college and for books and all of those things, right? Well, I did. I don't know if everybody has to do that. And the only place I could get to hire me was Walmart. And I remember going into his office and being like, so I got this job at Walmart. And he looked me in the eyes and he said, they're a horrible company. It's nothing against you, but while you work there, I won't be able to associate with you. And to his word and to his credit, he did not talk for me my entire 4-month tenure working at Walmart. Like, that's a man of principle. And that taught me to be a man of principle.
Yeah, well, if he was anything, right? Yeah. So, happy birthday, David.
Oh, no, but and then I got a good one, too. I got, like, a much better one. And that was, I took costume history was the first class I took with David Howard. I was a freshman in a class full of seniors and juniors. So, like, I didn't really fit in with the group. Now, one thing, right, and I'm sure this will work for you a little bit, I was convinced the first day of class that class began at 11:30. Not 11, but at 11:30.
Right.
So 11:30 comes around, and I'm like, oh, I got to head to class, right? Because, of course, I'm not going to get there right at 11:30. I'm going to get there like 11:35, right? I walk in at 11:35, and all eyes are on me like I have just committed the greatest sin in the world. And I sit down, I'm like, sure, I don't know, it's 5 minutes, like, whatever. And class continues, and whatever. David says, Devon, I'd like to speak to you after class. And I'm like, what's up, David? And he's like, class starts at 11 o'clock. And I'm like, I was convinced it was 11:30. And he's like, yeah, I kind of respected how you just came in and sat down, though. That was pretty awesome. So that was like one of those moments where I'm just like, oh, yeah, no. And I was always there at 11:05. Every other class after that, when I went. But the more important story from that costume history class is, did you have to take costume history, right? I don't know if you got a design degree while you were.
No, I was a director, so I didn't have to go that deep into that.
So costume history is one of those classes that like almost everybody has to take except for directors, which is pretty crazy, I guess. But as a technical, you have to take both sections of it. And I'm a freshman, and one of the big things in it is that you have to do this notebook. And the reason why you do the notebook is so that on the final exam, that is what you can use. That it's open this notebook that you put together. So it's supposed to be your crib notes for that final exam.
Yeah, and the notebook was one of those projects that you would inevitably see everybody seeing like the last week of the semester, trying to like scribble it and get it together so that they could bring it with them. But they had all semester to do it, but they never did.
Now, funny you should say that, Sejohn, because there are two types of people in this world. There are the types of people who, when the chips are up and we're right at the end of it, they're going to work real hard to throw together that notebook. And then there's the type of person who's like, oh, if I were going to do a notebook, I probably would have worked on it all semester, so I guess I'm going to go on without one. So all of those people running around like chickens with their head cut off, putting together their notebooks, and I'm like, I'm not going to do it. And all of these seniors and juniors to little freshman Devon are like, David Howard will hate you for the remainder of your time at URI if you fail to do the notebook. They were convinced. They were so afraid of David Howard. And I'm like, really? That doesn't seem to make any sense. And they're like, it's the truth. The notebook means more to him than anything else in the world. This was what people felt, Sejohn. This is what URI was like a year before you got there.
Yeah, but I think this is what people get like in college, is they're still in that phase where like teachers are still authority figures to them and still not humans yet. And so they're like convinced that everything they say is like the gospel, right? And so they get really attached to these things.
So I still being me, despite being younger, go to David and go, David, I need to ask you a serious question. And he's like, yeah, sure thing, Devon. Because he was always welcoming. He would always have time for any of the students. David's a great guy. And I'm so happy that we're dedicating this first segment of the episode to him. I really am. I sat down with him and I go, David, everybody is like going crazy over the notebook for this class. He's like, well, remember, it's real important that you have it because for the final exam. And I'm like, yeah, I understand that, David. The thing that is like hard for me to understand is they're saying that if I fail to do this notebook, you will hold it against me for the remainder of my time at URI. And that just doesn't seem right. Like, you don't seem like that kind of person. So I figured I'd come right to you to get like the straight shit on that. So he looks at me and he's like, is that really how people think of me? And I'm like, dude, I don't know. This is just what everybody's telling me because I'm like, you know, in the grand scheme of things, I don't think the notebook is that important for me to do. Because I had a lot of other stuff going on at that time, right? Second semester in college, I had other projects to do. And like a notebook, I didn't think it would behoove me. And I go, David, I'm just telling you what they're saying. And I wanted to make sure that like by not doing one little thing for you, I was going to torpedo my entire college career. I would do that later, but for someone else. Now, he goes, no, that's not the case at all. And I go, that's what I figured, David, because I was going over the syllabus and saw that a notebook is only worth 10% of my grade, which means I'm still able to get a 90, which is an A, even without the notebook. So those two things just didn't jive for me.
Yeah. Hey, look at that, paying attention to the syllabus. Anyway.
And David looked at me, and I want to say that this was the first of many sincere looks, but it's probably the most sincere he ever looked at me in my time at URI, and said, that's what the syllabus is for. Thank you so much for reading it. And it was that moment for him. But also, I think that conversation with me, now, you know, for whatever it is one of the reasons why he became a more welcoming and understanding person, because he was always that welcome, understanding guy. He just had that aura of like authority around him. Mm-hmm. I don't want to say like Snape. I'm trying to think of like a good teacher character from fiction that like it sort of embodies.
I mean, if you still want to, I mean, Professor McGonagall, if you want to still go Harry Potter, like, it's totally that.
Yeah,
like,
totally.
That idea that she is definitely the one that obviously cares about you, obviously is approachable, but at the end of the day, she also expects you to do the damn work, right? Like, that is McGonagall to a T. So, like, that's who he was.
So you got McGonagall. But before that, he had that, like, aura around him that, like, you cross David Howard, you're done. And really, I feel like that came from the fact that, like, my freshman year, we did Beauty and the Beast. That's where that Cogsworth costume you got to wear came from.
Yeah, I know.
And he was a crazy man during that show.
I mean, and
it was passion. It was total passion. And that's why I always like, well, I respect this guy. He's passionate about his work. Like, this is the person I want to learn from. But yeah, I think about it. So thank you, David Howard. Happy birthday. And now on to more. So I'll pass it to Sejohn because I feel like I've been holding on to the subject ball. So here you go, buddy.
Thanks for handing me your balls, Devon.
It's just one ball.
Oh, no. That's not a road we should go down. No, man, I just wanted to kind of get into some of the stuff we've been doing this week. We've been kind of kicking the stream into high gear this week. What did you do this week on the stream?
This week on the stream, I beat Castlevania, the original Castlevania.
Nice. Amazing.
And that was what I wanted to bring it to this, and I'm so happy you gave me the opportunity.
Yeah. So anything new this time? Anything fun and exciting to report?
Really, I just learned like how overpowered the holy water actually is. If you catch any of the bosses with the holy water, they're basically stun locked, and you can just destroy them. And that's like something I truly learned, because I knew that like that was the way to beat Dracula, but I didn't realize that so many other bosses had that same exploit.
Nice.
So
that's amazing.
It was awesome. And also, I'll give him a shout out here. Chubster McDougal is a guy who like started watching me right as I got to Dracula, and it was a long road to beating Dracula, because that's something that like I'd been able to get to Dracula since I was a young man. But I've never beaten him to say that I've beaten Castlevania. And this guy was like totally my Eye of the Tiger song. Because
Nice.
every time I died, he's like, you got this, you got this. And then like I said, I can't do it anymore. Like it was getting real late. Like it was like almost after midnight. And I'm like, I got to stop playing. Like I'm just making stupid mistakes now. This will be my last try at Dracula. And in that last try at Dracula, I got him to his second form for the very first time. And then he only had like 3-4 hits left. But I had just said I would be done. So I look and I'm like, you know what? No. I'll give myself 4 more lives. I'll give myself 1 more continue. That first life beat Dracula. And now I get to say forever that I've completed the original Castlevania.
That's amazing. That's awesome. See, I'm glad that you're having good audience experience. So like, that's one of the things that I'm trying to pick up on with my part of the stream. There is I've only had 1 or 2 people paying attention the last couple of times I've done it, and like this week I had some guy who jumped on and in true Twitch fashion within like 3 lines was like, "Yo, smoke a bowl." It's like I'm not gonna do that. Thanks, Twitch. Oh man. Yeah, so like we're at both ends of the spectrum as far as audience participation goes. I'm glad that you got a good one.
I mean, you want to talk about the best one. The best one goes to Dale, who's Shakatar. She was playing Song of the Deep this past stream, and one of the developers of the game came and watched her. And they had like a very deep conversation about the development of Song of the Deep. That's not true. It wasn't Song of the Deep. It was Abzu. Abzu was the one that she had the conversation with. She played Song of the Deep and Abzu over this past week, and they're very similar games.
I was gonna say that's a theme going on. All right.
Well, she is Shark Atar.
Nice.
But yeah, so she played Abzu, and then like since she's so good at that game, having one of the devs come in, she was able to still bring the game to completion and have like a real in-depth conversation about what it was like to develop that game.
That's amazing.
And I feel like that's like one of the cool stories of streaming.
Yeah. Yeah, no, like I'm so happy that we live in the time that we do, like streaming like we do. I mean, hell, doing this podcast like we do and being able to connect with the audiences in the way that we're able to connect with them is amazing. So I would never give it up for the world. But of course, I get the guy that instantly is on, like, following me around, talking about how Resident Evil is going to make me poop my pants and I should smoke a bowl. I was just like, thanks, dude.
Speaking of Resident Evil, I'm a little bit mad at you. But really, I should be mad at PlayStation Network. I shouldn't be mad at you. I'm mad at PSN because I own it on PS3. Like, I bought it on PS3. But if I want to play it on PS4, I need to buy it again.
Yeah, they just did like a big re-release for it and all that sort of stuff too, so they're like making a big deal out of it. Yeah, they should do more cross-buy stuff with that. But that's all around. It's not even just the Resident Evil stuff. Like,
maybe
they
just
do
like
it
a discount, like a trade-up discount. That'd be nice.
I mean, we've talked about this before with Nintendo, right? Like, how many times have we bought Mario? And it's just one of those things that we're getting to a point where we're so used to, if it's tangible and we lose it and we have to buy it again, like, we understand because we lost that tangible thing, right? But if it's not tangible and we lose it, there's something weird about, like, well, we didn't even have it in the first place. So the idea that we have to keep going out there and purchasing this nothing feels really weird to us, right? And I don't know what that is. I don't know why that difference is okay. Like, it's okay if I lost the disc to Resident Evil and I have to rebuy it, but it's not okay if I have to rebuy the informational download directly from Konami, right?
Well, it's Capcom, but yeah, I understand what you're saying. Yeah, it is. It's a strange thing about the digital marketplace in general. Like, I remember for a real long time with iTunes, if you downloaded the song and then, like, you lost your hard drive or your iPod got corrupted, you'd have to rebuy that song.
Yeah.
And, like, thank God that they caught up and realized that, like, no, we're actually tracking everything.
Yeah.
These people should be able to get their song back.
Right, as long as, like, and then what did they do for a while? They allowed you to, like, only license, like, so many devices to play your music and stuff like that, and then, like, yeah, we are definitely growing. Like, we're definitely getting better at that sort of stuff, and so hopefully the video game industry will catch up to that sort of thing. But, like, now if I buy a movie through a service, and then I have that service on 3 different devices, I don't have to buy it 3 different times, you know?
Yeah, it's one of these things that, like, so it really hurt when I'm like, oh, I already own this game, and I said I'd play through it again, and, like, sure, I can set up my PS3, it still works, but, like, I want to play it on my PS4. Like, I own it, and I want that.
the PS4 release, I will say, is kind of worth it. It's a beautiful looking game. They've also added a couple of other features to it, playing as different characters and things like that, which is really interesting. Different costumes for characters and things like that, I should say. So like, there's some actually really interesting stuff in the latest release of Resident Evil that made it worth it. I also got it when it was on sale for like $5 though. So I don't know where to stand with that, you know. I don't know. This game is one of those games that I would go back to 1,000 times, and I have gone back to 1,000 times. So I'd drop another $20 on it. But that's me, you know. Like, I love these games.
I have said on record on this podcast, I've started it numerous times, and I play for like half an hour, and I'm like, yeah, not for me. Yeah. So that's why it was kind of like, oh, that kind of stinks. Like, if it were like $5 because I've already given them the $20 before, I'd probably say, you know, I got it. I understand, right? You guys added a little bit more. You know, you're transferring my license or however I could justify $5. But buying it brandy new again, it just feels a little ugh.
Yeah.
But you know, I said I'd play it, so who knows what I'm gonna do? Because
I mean, if you can get a hold of this
promise.
Well, because you know, they do have a Resident Evil something coming out in the next year. I'm trying to remember what it is now. I mean, like, they're not doing 8 yet, but they're talking about it. But there was supposed to be some holdover. Maybe it's more DLC for 7 that I'm thinking about. But there is going to be some more Resident Evil something in the next like 9 months or so. So keep your eyes out, because PlayStation likes to do those like catch-up deals where they're like, oh, this new Resident Evil's coming out. We'll buy all the old Resident Evils for $5 a piece, right? Which I think is actually how I got Resident Evil, was back when the when 6 was coming out or something like that. I was able to get a hold of it for like $5, which is nice.
Yeah, no, I can't disagree with that. I can't fault it. It's just one of those things where I'm like, I need to keep my eyes to the sky and wait and hope to get one of those deals again. Because I do want to give it a shot. I mean, like, you of all people, if I'm just gonna heap praise upon everybody today, are one of those people who are like, your video game recommendations really mean something to me. So it is one of those games that I'll do it because you said so, but I'm not going to pay the $20.
Yeah, man, and like, do it with a guide. Like, do it for $5 and do it with a guide, and just see your way to the end, just so that you can see it, so that when people talk about Resident Evil, like, you know what's going on, because like, it did change games. It changed a lot of what people thought games could and should do. I mean, it was the lifeblood of the horror game genre for years, right? And the fact that it's not anymore is actually, I mean, that genre no longer exists, and it solely no longer exists because Resident Evil no longer exists, you know? Because they've been trying to put out, speaking of Konami, they've been trying to put out Silent Hill games left and right for the last 20 years, and they've just never stuck. But every time a new Resident Evil game comes out, the whole world pays attention, you know? So, like, it's just one of those games that, like, as a gamer, as somebody interested in video games, you have to check it out. You have to see what you can do with it. And to me, it's such a simple game, really, that, like, to not just play it to completion is unnecessary. You can finish that game in 3 hours. There's a straight up achievement to finish that game in 3 hours. So there's like, it's a fascinating little piece of video game history that we still have really good access to. So I just recommend to everybody to play it, you know? Because that's one of the things about video games right now, is we don't archive enough, right? Like, as video game enthusiasts, like, we really don't go out of our way to make sure that the games that we have around us are going to stick with us long enough for our kids and our kids' kids to see. So, like, if we're not careful, we're going to lose a lot of this sort of stuff. So anytime there is something being saved and savored, like Resident Evil has been, I support the hell out of it, you know?
I can't disagree with that. I mean, like, it's one of those things, too, where, like, I want to go to retro game stores and I want to buy these games that I had in my childhood that I foolishly threw away by trading into Funko-Land. I didn't throw them away, okay? I'm not a monster, but like, oh, I'll trade them into Funko-Land and I can buy some new game, right? And to be fair, I'm fairly certain that's how I got Final Fantasy for classic Nintendo and like Legend of Zelda for Super Nintendo. Like, I traded in some crap for some real gems. But at the same time, those crap games are the ones that are like really hard to find now. And it's not like I want to have it because it's worth something. It's like, I'd like to play through Bad Dudes again. I'd like to play Sunset Riders again, though I'm not entirely convinced that one's not in my house somewhere. But
well, and that's the tricky thing about like savoring all of this stuff, or like trying to trying to estimate what is going to be nostalgic to you in 10 years, trying to guess essentially what's going to happen. Like you don't know what's going to matter and what's going to stick, so you never know what to hold on to. So as a consumer, you're so much better off trading games in and just upping to the next thing until you hit that thing that you love so much you just don't want to get rid of, right? So like you never did the wrong thing trading those games in, but also at the end of the day, now here you are 20 years later, like looking back on it and just wondering what if, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I think that's just part of being a collector, part of being a hobbyist, part of being, somebody that's so invested in this stuff. It's the same for the movies for me. Like, there's tons of movies that I've owned in my life that I was just now I'm like, man, I wish I still had a copy of this because I can't find it anywhere. I used to own a really good, really nice edition of the British miniseries State of Play, right? And I love it. It's this like 6 hour long, perfect um, political thriller, British political thriller, right? And like to get it now, it's like 60, $70. And I don't know, I had gotten it for like $10 out of Newberry Comics or something like that, right? And like I had it. It was in my hand, I owned it, but I didn't watch it a lot. So when it came time to like sell stuff, I was like, this will get me a pretty penny. It's a British miniseries. And sure enough, it did. I think it got me more than I paid for it. So like I was happy then, but now I wish I had that. Every day I wish I had that.
Yeah, it's weird. It's just a weird thing about collecting, and also like going into those game stores or going into movie stores and seeing like you said, State of Play is like $70, or like looking at Ninja Turtles 3 and it's like $50 for that cartridge. I'm like, yeah, I'd like to own this game again, but I can't justify it. And like
Right, exactly.
whatever the legality or whatever your stance on like emulation and ROMs is, like that's a really cool thing that we did to catalog and like keep all of that information from our past.
Yeah.
So it's something that like I understand why like Nintendo is against it. I understand why they don't want emulation and ROMs going on. But at the same time, they should be doing that sort of stuff so that their games are forever kept because it's part of history, right?
Yeah,
Like,
where the really cool studies for this sort of stuff came into play though, where it was actually with Napster and LimeWire. When those sorts of things were kind of coming under the microscope, people were really scrutinizing what kids were doing with that sort of stuff. It became this huge thing where people were like, "But this is how music is getting around now." And then it ended up changing the game. I mean, it's why the iTunes system like you could buy singles on iTunes. It all exists because somebody somewhere was smart enough to realize these kids don't want to buy a whole album if they only like one song. Look at them go to Napster. Look at them go to LimeWire and only download this one song off the whole thing. What if we just sold them that one song and at least we get the money for it, right? And somebody in the industry was smart enough to say that, which led to this entire new system now where the music industry is completely different than it was in the 90s. 20 years ago, you lived and died by making a good CD. Now, all you need to be able to do is record one song and you can live for days, Like you'll be famous and you'll be famous by the end of the week and you never have to make a full album if you don't want to. You can just be featured on everybody else's albums for the rest of your life. Like, you know, and so it completely changed overnight and it was all because these guys like Napster and LimeWire were going out there and just being like, we don't like the system as it's set up now because basically we don't have access to the music we want to have access to. And what you're talking about with ROMs and emulation, it's the exact same thinking. They're just like, we don't have access to the video games we want to have access to at this moment. And we're the ones that are going to keep it alive. You know what I mean? The guys that do have access to it right now are keeping it on a shelf somewhere, dusty and gross, collecting mold. So why don't we just like do what we can to get these games to the people that want to play them? And there's a real beauty in that. Like, it's really hard to ignore like the warm and fuzzies that you can get from a story like that, despite the fact that it is also theft. Like you can't ignore the fact that it is illegal and like you said, it's illegal for reasons. You know why companies want to hold on to those things, but at the end of the day, there's a balance there. They need to hold on to those things, sure, but they also need to be sure to make their fans come back.
yeah, true. And that's like, it's why it's so strange that like Nintendo, it felt like they were on the right track with something like the NES Classic, but then they just pull them off the shelves because someone corrupted them.
Mm-hmm.
Like a very small portion of the population corrupted that system and made it so you could put every game imaginable on it. And that's like, Because I got to tell you, like, I have the ability to do that. Like, it doesn't look like something difficult to do. But also at the end of the day, I don't want to corrupt that thing because it's this beautiful centerpiece. And like you said, like, if I wanted to show those games to my kids one day, I don't see the technology in the NES Classic us really ever going away from it. Or if we do go away from it in like 30, 40 years, I'm fairly certain I will still have an old HDMI access monitor. And I can be like, here you go, kids. This is what Dad used to play. And they'll be like, oh, you have to use your hand? It's like a baby's game. And I'm like, shut up, man. I'll just delete you and reboot a new child. Because that's what the future will be.
And then I'm going to give a younger me this copy of this almanac.
Beat up on my dad's bully's grandson.
Yeah, that didn't get confusing.
No, that movie was weird. Back to the Future 2, you're a confusing movie. Everybody else loves you too much to say it. You're a bit confusing, Back to the Future 2. And All the Balls in the Air makes you an interesting movie, but if I sit down and try to logic through you, I just want to throw up.
Yeah, no. Zemeckis threw logic out the window then, and he hasn't gotten it back, to be entirely honest.
Oh, Forrest Gump. How was that one guy at all those things?
Oh, Polar Express.
Oh, that's how, right? Because he's the conductor of the Polar Express.
Yeah. That's what it is. That's actually Forrest Gump 2, the Polar Express. They just didn't give it its full title. They were like, this isn't going to sell if we do that.
I love it. I love this. And all of this talk about movies. First of all, I need to just put a capper on your thing about music. Do you know what song I heard again today?
What?
Too many years later? Friday by Rebecca Blackwell. Maybe not her name, but
that's a pull, man, and that's exactly what I'm talking about, right?
Dude, that song has not aged well. Like, I don't know what we were drinking in the year that came out. I couldn't even tell you the year that it came out, but like listening to it, she just says like fun 7 times, and that's a chorus.
I'm gonna say 2012. You want to take a bet on that?
I would probably go with 2012. It was definitely after my carnival days. So it has to have been between 11 and 17. And like, there's part of me that wants to say 13, but I'm going to go 12 because that's when Dale was still in high school.
Ooh, so close.
11?
2011.
Wow.
Which means that 2012 would have been when it would have been going around, right? Like,
No. Because that song appeared, everybody heard it via some sort of magical Wiccan spell, and then it disappeared into the darkness, taking with it all of the royalties and licensing fees that it had collected.
Recorded in 2010, so it was out in 2011. That's what it is. By 2012, Jimmy Fallon was singing it on The Tonight Show.
By 2012, Jimmy Fallon, the host of The Tonight Show.
And famous joke killer was killing that joke.
So there you go. So that happened. Just like, speaking of like how music has changed, I don't think she's done another song. She is going to retire off of the money that Friday made her. Mm-hmm. And there you go. The music industry in a nutshell. And the second thing is, we've talked a lot about movies, and I'd like to transition into something. But before that, I'd like to introduce a new segment onto the Say Report, something I have given Sejohn no prior knowledge of.
Not at all.
A segment I like to call Netflix and Will. So Will is where I mostly get my Netflix recommendations from. I love movies and all of that stuff, and when it comes to Netflix, I tend to stick to my little corner of the sky and watch the things that I already know about. I'm sure I don't need to tell noted Futurama falling asleep Reddit subreddit user Sejohn Sarowick that. But,
that was a mouthful, but yes.
Yeah, that was that. I did not think that one through. So what Will brought to my attention today is there's a show on NBC, and it's probably the best show that you're not watching after Crossing Lines, which had one season on NBC and now has continued on Netflix. So I'm kind of packing 2 into this Netflix and Will segment. But the other one is called The Night Shift. And it takes place at a San Antonio hospital right near an Army base. So a lot of the doctors are Army doctors, like who have just come back from combat or who are between deployments. So it's kind of got like your MASH elements, but in a more modern time. And it has like, it scratches that itch for like the people who want the action of war, but also scratches that itch of those people who want a medical drama. And it is a summer show through and through. It always has aired. It's aired for the last 4 years during the summer on NBC. And I watched the first 2 seasons, and I absolutely loved them. You know, I wish I could tell you anyone who's in it. The only person I can think is in it is the guy who played El Rey in Planet Terror.
Nice.
Is in the show. And he's like an admin. Oh, Scott Wolf is in the show. Scott Wolf comes into the show at the end of the first season. Like, he's the only other real name on this particular program.
There you go.
and I love this show. But then the third season, I missed like one episode. And I have to tell you, Night Shift is heavily serialized. You miss an episode, you'll be scratching your head wondering what happened in 40 minutes. That has completely changed everything you know about this hospital. So Will,
that's a very Shonda Rhimes style of television. If you ever watch anything that she does, like Scandal, it's every 5 minutes a huge thing happens that completely changes the reality of the show. It's like insane how much is fit into one episode. So like I'm not surprised that other people have started to pick up on that. Like, I've heard Riverdale is a lot like that as well.
I know, that's why I haven't tried yet. I'm waiting for it to come to Netflix. I don't know. Has it yet?
It just did, because CW has that deal where 11 days after, or something like that, yeah, 11 days after the final episode, the whole season will just go right up on Netflix. So it actually is up now.
All right, so well, that's something else to check. Check out Riverdale too. We're throwing 3 in. So Will today asked me if I had ever seen Night Shift. Now, as it unfortunately always is in modern conversations, movie or TV show, because everything has the same name as everything else.
Right.
And he says TV show, and I'm like, loved the first 2 seasons. I have every episode of the 4th waiting for me on my DVR. I have no way to watch the 3rd season. And he's like, it's on Netflix over here. Now, that's the other thing. Will is our friend internationally. He lives in the UK. And if you've never left America, you might not know that Netflix in the UK and in other countries, they get other shows than what we get in America.
It's actually a real big point of contention for a lot of people, because very often it's that their libraries are stunted compared to America's. But you're talking about actually something they've got that we don't.
Well, no, I'm not, because the thing is that, like, he recommends stuff to me all the time, and this, I would like to go forward. Every time I get a recommendation from Will, if it crosses my mind while we're recording, I will definitely share it, because he's got a good eye for Netflix viewing. And the first thing I do whenever he recommends something is check if it's available, and I'll be damned if all 3 seasons of The Night Shift are currently available on Netflix.
Nice. There you go.
So I have to tell you, it's been so long since I've watched a show, because it's a summer show, and it usually runs like 10 to 12 episodes, that I am going to start tonight, once we're done recording, at episode 1, season 1, and I will do my damnedest to catch up as quick as possible so that I can watch this season 4. And nice. If this is the kind of show that you think you're into, if you like a good medical drama that has like really deep characters and like you legitimately care about what's going on, I recommend The Night Shift. And that's Netflix and Will.
Man, awesome. So I'm glad to hear that Will is contributing more to this show, pulling his weight, finally paying the rent.
Speaking of Netflix and Will, I saw a British movie over the weekend.
Oh.
And as I said, my second viewing is going to be the viewing that matters the most. I saw Baby Driver again.
Nice.
And just as I had surmised many, many times on this show, watching it that second time without any sort of, pre-thoughts or anticipation, with really no expectations, that movie went down so much smoother.
Excellent.
And now I can't wait to watch it again. So it is one, if you saw Baby Driver and you weren't 100% on board, if you didn't drink the Kool-Aid that it seemed like everybody else in society drank, give it another shot, because once you know the pacing, it is a real treat. And that's it. That's pretty much it. That's the stuff I did. If you have anything else to share.
No, I was trying to think if there's any particular movie that's really definitely true for me. I mean, I don't know, man. I can't think of a movie that I've ever really hated the first time that I came around on eventually. Jupiter Ascending, I will say, I was really down on for the first hour, and then something happens in that movie that is phenomenal, in which Mila Kunis looks basically into camera right at the audience and goes, I have no idea what's going on. Can you explain it to me? And Channing Tatum is essentially like, nah. They're in a car driving, and she screams like, I don't know what's going on. And you realize as an audience member, they've succeeded in putting a character in this movie that's really taking you along for the ride because you don't know what's going on either. And it's amazing. And suddenly the rest of that movie is just a fucking trip, man. At some point, Channing Tatum is a dog that has wings and magic roller skates. It's a magic carpet ride of a movie, man. And so that's the closest I think I can get to it. But it wasn't that I went back and watched it later and it clicked. It clicked about halfway through that movie for me.
I will say I love Jupiter Ascending. Jupiter Ascending gets the Stay Report seal of approval. And it's not like I hated Baby Driver. It's just like sometimes you go into a movie and you have these unfortunate expectations. Or for me, it was a lack of knowledge. Like watching the movie and seeing those first like 5 minutes that are an homage to a video that Edgar Wright directed, I'm like, Edgar Wright just ripped off this music video because I didn't know that he had directed that music video. I was just out of my brain. It did not exist in there.
Right.
So I just felt like this guy's ripping off someone else's work, and then I'm like, and that work is not super well known, right? So like he gets away with it, and that really upsets me. Mm-hmm. So like I'm dealing with that stupid baggage that I myself brought into the theater. So then the second time, that doesn't exist. So I'm able to enjoy it, and it becomes like one of those fun extrapolations of an original short film idea. And that's excellent.
Yeah, man, and that's one of the hardest things to like think about, like as artists that go out in the world and do this sort of stuff. Like, how do we keep our audience on the same page as us, right? Like what can you do to keep them just as informed as you? Because like you, at the end of the day, I don't believe that like as an audience member, I should have to do research to enjoy a movie, right? Like if that's what I have to do in order to enjoy your film, you're not making a great film. You might be making a good one, but you're not making a great film. Great movies, no matter what the source material is, bring you along for the ride, right?
Accessibility.
Yeah, like you need to be as accessible as possible to your audience, right? And so that's what made some of his earlier stuff so good. The stuff that he did with Simon Pegg is that like you didn't need to see Night of the Living Dead to enjoy Shaun of the Dead. You never needed to see a sci-fi horror action movie in order to enjoy World's End, right? Like you never needed to see Bad Boys in order to enjoy Hot Fuzz. But having seen those things, they were enjoyable, and I think that held true for Baby Driver. Like I don't know anybody that's ever really sat down and watched through some of the old car like getaway films like I have. I fucking love French Connection, and I love the original and the remake of The Italian Job. You know, with Wahlberg and Statham and Edward Norton. Like I love both versions of that. So like the getaway film is always like one of my favorite genres of film that just doesn't get done that often. So it was beautiful to see that, and having that knowledge watching this movie definitely like informed my viewing. But you know, I was also there with my girlfriend who doesn't watch those movies, and she still enjoyed the hell out of it too. So like I think he does a good job of making that movie really accessible even in those moments, because even you, like you said, like you admitted the first time, there were things that didn't sit right with you because you thought one thing, but it still ended up you ended up kind of enjoying it despite yourself. And I think that's a really good sign of it, right?
Even then, there is that moment for me, like with you and Jupiter Ascending, where that original music video shows up.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, okay, so he clearly knows what he's ripping off, and he's showing homage to it. And then I look it up, and I'm like, oh, he directed it. I'm an idiot. I got in my own way with enjoying Baby Driver.
Yeah.
I was the problem.
Well, and you hear that stuff all the time from people, right? Where they talk about things that don't make them happy in movies. And you got to be really careful about that, because now we live in a world with social media. So people jump on Twitter and they start bashing a TV show or a song or a movie, not realizing that what they're doing is actually embarrassing themselves more. You know, I weirdly just had a conversation like this about Nicki Minaj the other day when she had this whole thing with Lorde after Lorde's first album got really big. And I was having this conversation because Lorde's new album is out, and it's actually a real decent. It's not as good as Pure Heroin, I don't think, but it's a really good album still to like drive to and just spend like an afternoon just driving around in the sunlight to. So recommendation on an album there.
I would like to interrupt 1 second. Mm-hmm. There are few things in this world that are better than Pure Heroin. Continue.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. Is the new album's good, but it's just not as good as.
Did you catch up with what I meant, though, Sejohn?
Yeah. I'm there now. Sorry, I'm thinking about this Lord thing and thinking about like how good that album is. Pure Heroin is just so good, though. Yeah, so when that album comes out and it gets real big, and Nicki Minaj gets on Twitter and starts bashing Lorde for like trying to, I don't know, steal hip hop or something. I forget exactly what the reason was for why she was so upset. And a lot of people were instantly just like, "How much do you know about Lorde?" Like, she's this girl from like a town, like a little nowhere town in New Zealand. So like the stuff that she's talking about and singing about and rapping about, like. That's her stuff. It's more real than a lot of the other hip hop that's out there right now, than a lot of the other rap that's out there right now. So like people are like, you got to be real careful because Lorde's legit, right? And that's what you're talking about is legitimacy. So like you see this thing and you get real upset and nervous because it doesn't feel legit until you do the research and then you realize, oh, I misunderstood that, right? And I think that people have got to be real careful with that nowadays because we're so quick to judge that in that way, and there's so many platforms on which we can judge things that we end up looking like idiots if we're not careful, you know?
Yes, I do. And you're completely right. And again, I'm just like real happy that like, but that's the problem is before I went out and said like, oh, Baby Driver's great if you love movies that exploit existing art. I'm like, well, let me look into this existing art and before I like put my foot in my mouth. And the problem is, literally across the board, we don't vet things anymore. No one takes that, like, and really, we live in the internet age, right? So it takes at most a minute to get information confirming or denying something that you see or believe.
And even when you like, and even when you see it, you can't believe it, right? Because like, I'll give you a pure example of this from me. I've got pure heroin stuck in my head now. But I'll give you an example of this from me. The 50 Shades of Grey movies. I still cannot believe that they are like a popular thing. I just refuse to believe it. Those movies come out and I'm just convinced that they are just like falling on deaf ears. But apparently I'm wrong because they're making bank and they're making more of them, right? But like that is my blind spot. If I had to call out one thing that is totally in my blind spot, it's 50 Shades of Grey, the film movies.
Have you seen any of them?
I have watched the first one. I have not seen the second one's come out so far, right? That's how little I pay attention to them. Yeah. No, 50 Shades of Grey I've seen though. 50 Shades of Grey I caught on an airplane, and I was just like, it was either watch that or watch the person next to me snore. So
one is a bit more titillating, and one's 50 Shades of Grey. Now, I have to say, biggest film regret of 2017 so far is not having gotten out to see the second one, because I loved the first one. It was just an incredible experience at the movies. So I am sad that I missed it. And that's the thing. What we need to do, right? And like we're big fans of making promises that we don't keep, but we need to go see the third one together. Actually, here's what I hope happens. Because they're big fans of doing these like huge blocks of all the movies.
Oh no. Oh
dude,
God. Yep.
You need to see it in theater. You need to see the kind of people who go out to it. And I think that is how we do it. And then I get to fix my 2017 regret of missing 50 Shades Darker, and we do it. And I think that right now, if you're willing, I'm willing to make that promise to you that if it is possible in any way, shape, or form, we do that together.
Yeah, and you know why I'm going to agree to this? I'm going to agree to this because, once again, me knowing full well it's in my blind spot, I'm betting this last one just goes straight to DVD.
Oh, like the last Divergent film?
Yeah.
Which, let's be completely honest, ain't never gonna happen. Like, just come to terms with it. Ain't never gonna happen.
Yeah, it's a shame. It's a real shame that they got that deep into that series. But yeah. So one last thing that I definitely want to talk about before we go today, kind of in this vein, people kind of like not doing their research and getting down on stuff before. There's a lot of talk going on this week because we definitely have to talk about this. Spider-Man: Homecoming had the biggest second weekend drop in Marvel Cinematic Universe history.
I believe it had the second biggest, or was it the biggest? I mean, I was only watching local news, so you can only take it for.
What would it have been? It might have been second. What would it have been second to?
Honestly, Incredible Hulk is all I can think of.
Yeah, that's
Because
true. I don't know.
that movie saw a tremendous drop from 1 to 2, based purely on the budget numbers that I saw.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe Incredible Hulk, but right now everybody's touting this one, or at least around here, as like this huge thing, right? And it's that thing that happens. It actually happens to Disney specifically a lot. I notice because Pixar gets this all the time, Disney gets this all the time. Everybody's turning around and talking about how this is it. Like this is the death knell for Marvel films that people are just getting sick of them now, right? Important facts to point out that people don't seem to be researching. It's still making more money than a lot of things that have come out this weekend. It has definitely made its budget back already, so it's already in the it's already in the black, right? Like it's fine.
Yeah,
The
there's
movie,
no red in its ledger.
yeah,
That
yeah,
was for
yeah,
you, Will.
yeah. But like, it's a it's this weird thing that's going on where everybody's just waiting for Marvel to fall on its face, and people are really latching onto it right now out here. And I just want to point out to people that are maybe haven't seen it yet and are hearing some weird things this week that I still stand by that film. I don't know, man. I have heard a lot of people this week who really enjoyed their time with it and just like felt like it was just a good time. And you know, every not every superhero movie in the last few years has worked that well for them, you know, and basically it's just a good, happy movie. And I think that Marvel decided with this one to really just have a really good time and to not make it seem like an end of the world film. And I think that that's weirdly rubbing a lot of people the wrong way, which I think that like, I thought people were sick of that after Ultron when they were like, oh, it's just, why does it always have to be the whole world's at stake? Why can't it be more localized? And then here's a movie that's super localized, and now all I'm hearing people talk about is how inconsequential it feels. And so it's like this weird thing in my head that I just can't wrap my brain around. So like I don't know, man. I just wanted to talk about how Marvel seems to be in this weird place at the moment, but I mean, they still got Thor coming out. There's no stopping Infinity War from happening. But I don't know, man. It's one of those weird things where I've always wondered what Marvel was going to do after Infinity War, and now like, is this the first signs of fatigue? Do we think that maybe after Infinity War things cool down for the superhero genre? I don't know. I don't know. What do you think?
All right. So first of all, I have other things to add. I took my mother to see 2 movies over this past week between Say Reports. One of them was Baby Driver, and I did not get to add this anecdote, so I'm jumping in with it. She recognized Noel Fielding and the Blue Royale Mint video. I mean, the Mint Royale Blue song video while we saw Baby Driver. And that made me happy as a human being. Because it's like, I guess like a parent watches their child, and when they see that they truly learned something, it makes them proud. It made me proud as her child that I taught her something. And so for her to be like, oh, Mighty Boosh, just Noel Fielding. Like, that was cool. And I like that she, like, yelled it in the theater. Like, I like that it's like, you're totally my mom, right? The other movie that I took my mother to go see is Spider-Man Homecoming. And at about the halfway mark of that film, she leaned over to me and said, I'm not enjoying this. And I'm like, oh okay. I could kind of tell because, like, her body language was giving that off. But then the reveal that, like, again, I saw coming, but apparently nobody else sees coming happened. And she got really into the movie again. So it's an odd movie. Its pacing is a little off, having watched it a second time. Like there's a lot going on, and it's not until that moment that the two really come together. And actually, like, like I said, we're going to spoil Spider-Man someday, but there's something off, Mike, I'd like to talk to you about that happens in the movie.
Ooh,
that,
okay.
like, that is one of those things that I really don't like when films do it. And I mean, I can sort of allude to it. I don't like when the script deliberately lies to the audience or does something that, like, misdirects a later reveal so that the audience doesn't have that reveal spoiled.
Okay.
And they do that in, like, pretty much spades. Like, there's a scene, and I'm like, oh, wow. Because I was, like, kind of excited knowing, like, having the proof to see that scene again. Like, when in The Usual Suspects, right? Like, once you've watched it a second time, once you've watched it that first time, that second viewing, you notice the little ticks and the little things that are going on. And it becomes more fun. Like, it enriches the experience. And that's, like, an example of it done right. Like, that's the proper way to do it. Once you know the key to the puzzle, it's cool to see that, like, no, we were dropping clues the whole time. And it was really kind of jarring to me to see that, like, they decided to go in a different direction with it. And then, like I said, we'll talk about it off camera, and we'll off camera, off mic, and we'll even talk about it eventually when we go into a spoiler episode for it.
Yeah.
But watching it that second time, I honestly feel like it doesn't have that. I don't know if, like, part of the money that Marvel continues to make with their films is because people go out and see the movie a second, a third time, like how much that affects their box office weekends.
Right.
And I feel like there are some people who saw that movie and were like, yeah, I need to see it again. You know, I saw it. I enjoyed it for what it was. But, you know, there's other movies coming out. Like, I really want to see War for the Planet of the Apes. Like, maybe I'll go back to Spider-Man some other time, or maybe there's some movies that I missed.
Well, and what it is what you're talking about is it's not one of their tentpole films this year. It's not one of the ones that they needed to succeed in order for them to survive, right? Guardians was, and Thor will be. But Spider-Man was not make or break for them. Spider-Man was just, honestly, because Sony was putting in half the money, they were just like, all right, like, we're going to do this and we're going to do it right. We're going to do it as right as we can. But really, this is just to get Spider-Man into the world for Infinity War. Like, that's what this movie always was, right? And it felt like that. And that's my biggest issue with it, is they couldn't get me past that feeling that this is great, but this is all just to build him up for Infinity War, you know?
I agree. Now, the third thing, right, because those are the first two that I wanted to bring up. The third thing is we don't need to worry about Marvel because these death knells have happened before, and you yourself just referenced it. After Ultron, people were like, we get it. The world is at stake. Change the fucking record. And they did, because all of the movies after Ultron have been a lot quieter, a lot closer to the vest, real self-contained stories. It's why I was a little nervous going into Homecoming, because Doctor Strange, like, yeah, sure, he saves the whole universe, but, like, nobody really knows that that's going on, right?
Right.
Like, their story feels so self-contained, like, because it is in its own little mirror pocket universe.
Yeah, well, and what it does really, really smartly is also time. But when you really get into the swing of Doctor Strange, it actually only happens in a matter of, like, 2 days.
Right. Like, it's super quick, that film.
Mm-hmm.
Same with, like, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Again, another self-contained story. Yes, there is a planet at peril, but it's not Earth. And the only people, like, I talked to one of the people I work with, and they're like, I hated it because it was all interpersonal relationships. And I'm like, but that's what made that movie good, is because that's what they decided to focus on, right? A year ago, you were complaining because all of these movies are these big action spectacles and the world is in stake. And now you're complaining because they went more introspective, right? People do not know what they want. So Marvel hears a complaint, right? And they're smart and they do listen to the complaints and they change it. So then you have, I'm trying to think of what followed up Ultron.
Ant-Man, right?
Ant-Man, right? Ant-Man, small, self-contained story, right? There was one moment where it brushes into contact with the rest of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. That is when Ant-Man fights Falcon. But other than that, that movie happens independent of everything else, right? And then you have Civil War, which, even though it is a much bigger global film, it is still, at the end of the day, a disagreement between Captain America and Iron Man.
Yeah, it becomes Tony, Bucky, and Steve. Like, that's what that movie is always about, is the three of them.
Right, and then you follow that up with Doctor Strange, self-contained, and then you follow up Doctor Strange with Guardians, and now you have Spider-Man Homecoming. And the fatigue has begun to set in with the people, and the way that they gauge it is by looking at the box office and seeing that drop-off. And again, because it wasn't a tentpole movie, they can be like, oh, okay, well, we're moving it back together, right? Like, I feel like if Spider-Man didn't exist, we would have already seen that switch over. I feel like Thor Ragnarok is going to have bigger implications for the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe. By its very nature, that's what it's going to be. It has Doctor Strange, it has Thor, it has Hulk, and those are the three that we know about.
Right. And I mean, it has Loki once again, which is actually like a telling sign. I mean, They've always had Loki, but remember, like, right now, he is still the #1 villain in the Marvel Universe in everybody's eyes. So the fact that we're even going back to a Loki story is going to be really important for the whole universe as well.
Right. Spider-Man was this weird, like, stopgap, like, all right, this isn't usually on the route of the bus, but the bus that usually does it is broken down, so we're going to take exit 60, we're going to drop you off, and then we'll continue to our final destination. And I think it's interesting because you do have that proof that, like, yes, people did want more introspective stories, but they were already tired of them at Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah.
There were people who didn't like it. Right? I just gave an example of that. So to have another small, self-contained story, there are people who are tired of that. And Marvel was already going to swing the other way with Thor Ragnarok. But they went one further because they got the opportunity from Sony.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what we're seeing. I think that is what is on display. But also, most importantly, and we're a show that threw them up against each other into Mortal Kombat, that's what DC needs to learn from. Now, granted, they don't have as many movies, but they need to know that listening to your fans doesn't, that's what it can be. It can be small changes over the course. And I hope that that's what we see with Justice League. I hope that Wonder Woman is a bigger part of it.
Yeah. Well, and I will say that I unfortunately think the lesson that DC is learning from all of this Marvel listening to fan stuff is that, like you were saying, they're taking the evidence that fans don't know what they want, and they're using it as an excuse to just make whatever they want, versus Marvel, who's like, fans don't know what they want, so let's just keep giving them something until,
until there's a breaking point.
And then we'll give them something else, right?
It's a rubber band, man. It's a rubber band, and they stretch it out until it snaps, and then they start stretching it out again in a different direction.
Yeah.
That was a pretty good example I just gave. I'm pretty happy about it. Sejohn, before we pass it off to the end, there's something that I've wanted to do for you, right? Because let's just keep this positivity train rolling. I foolishly thought that Super Kenshi only had 25 episodes, right? So I was really going to celebrate you penetrating that veil, like you were able to produce that many episodes of a show, and I was going to reward you, but you only had 22. I don't know where I got the number 25 in.
Oh,
so
man.
I want to, from the Say Report, first of all, I want to thank you for doing the show with me. You're great people. And congratulations on penetrating your barrier, man.
Thanks, Devon. You took a wonderful moment and you Devoned it up.
Yeah, what are you gonna do, right?
Thanks, Devon. This has been real fun. This has been real good.
It has been really good.
I'm excited to do 26 more or whatever it was.
It was 22, so 22 more episodes. Let's do more than 44 though. My barrier to penetrate is 45. So like I'd like to at least get to 46 episodes with you, buddy. So
man, you're a deep penetration. All right, let's do it.
You're a disgusting human being. I love you. I love you eternally. Thank you very much for doing this.
I love you. I love everybody that listens to this show. I want you all to know that, but I especially love Will.
We love you, Will, and we got to get you back on here, man. We need more Will on this show. But, let's pass it over to him so we can hear his beautiful voices. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening to the Say Report with your host, Devon Decker and Sejohn Serwick. Please follow the guys on Twitter and Facebook by searching for The Say Report, and you can always subscribe on your podcast channel so this is delivered straight to you and you can enjoy it every week. With apologies to your mother, we'll see you next time.